Hi, I'm Marina with the Round Lake Area Library, and I'm here today to talk to you about homemade ice cream. Today I'm going to teach you how to make 4 different types of ice cream, starting with the simplest that I found on TikTok that uses a mason jar. We're adding half a cup of heavy cream, then 2 teaspoons of sugar, a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla, and just a pinch of salt. Once we've added everything in all together, we're going to seal it up and do the hard part, which is to shake it for 3 straight minutes. While I'm shaking, I'm going to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about ice cream. Today's program, we're focusing entirely on ice cream, even though there are different varieties that you'll find in books and on websites about making ice cream, things like sorbets, gelatos, all that sort of stuff. Most of the differences are dependent upon how much dairy is in it, what type of dairy, or what ratios of fat are in it. Today, to help narrow down my focus so I didn't have a million different ice cream recipes to show you, or gelato recipes, or sorbet recipes, I focused strictly on different ice cream recipes. And I tried to pick a few that were different techniques, different ratios, to give you an idea of all the different things you can do when making ice cream. So we're starting off with this TikTok easy recipe that all you need is a mason jar and a few ingredients. We will go into 2 from a book that I found in the library, which I will share with you a little later on what that book is, and 1 recipe that I found on Pinterest. 2 of the other recipes are cook recipes, and 1 of them is no cook. 2 of them I churn in an ice cream maker, and 1 I show you how to do using a method that doesn't involve an ice cream maker, but involves freezing it and mixing up the ice cream in between freezing sessions. So we're about done shaking. I'm going to put it in the freezer for 2 hours, and then this is what it will look like when it comes out. This ice cream was probably the iciest of all 4 that I made. However, it was absolutely delicious still, had a fantastic vanilla flavor to it, and it was definitely the quickest option out of all 4 recipes, coming together in a total of 2 hours and 5 minutes or so from start to finish. And the TikTok recipe also said that in the middle of shaking, if you'd like, you can add chocolate chips or sprinkles to add a little extra oomph to it. The next 2 recipes I'm going to show you come from this book that I found in the library called The Ice Cream Bible by Marilyn and Tanya Linton. The first of these 2 recipes is a hot chocolate ice cream, which we start off by whisking 3 egg yolks with half a cup of granulated sugar until they're pale yellow and fluffy, as you can see. We've put the egg yolks aside and we're moving over to the stove where we have 2 cups of whole milk in a saucepan. And to this we're going to add in 4 ounces of hot chocolate mix. That's either 4 1-ounce packs, or if you like me, you might have a giant tub of cocoa. So you can scoop it all out and weigh it to measure it, which is what I did on my kitchen scale. We're going to put it on to low heat and whisk it all together until it's completely dissolved. We're going to keep whisking while it's on the heat so it doesn't burn, and we're going to go until it starts to get to be a low simmer, which is now. We're going to pull it off the heat and bring it over to the countertop where we have our egg yolk and sugar mixture and mix them together. The process we're using to mix them together is something called tempering. To do this, we take the hot chocolate mixture and we're just going to pour a little bit into the egg yolk mixture, whisking constantly. So the reason we do this is the hot chocolate mixture is hot while the egg mixture is cold to room temperature, depending on how the eggs were when you whisked them. And we don't want the eggs to start cooking and wind up with bits of cooked eggs in our ice cream. So by putting in just a little bit of hot chocolate, we're slowly bringing the eggs up to the temperature of the hot chocolate without actually cooking the eggs. So we'll keep doing this until everything's mixed together, and pour it all back into the saucepan and bringing it up to the stove to heat it up. because we do need to cook the eggs. We just want them to wait till it's all mixed together like this. So I've got it all back in the saucepan, and now we are going to bring it back over to the stove. Here we're going to put it onto a low heat and cook, whisking constantly until it's thickened. We want to be sure that we keep it moving so it doesn't burn or anything, and that we also do not let it get so hot that it starts to boil. So what we're looking for is that it's thick enough to coat the back of a wooden spoon. And what that means is when you draw a line through the liquid on your wooden spoon, the liquid's not going to come in and fill in that gap super quickly. So if it stays just like that, it's perfect. So we're going to take it off and bring it over to the counter. The next step in the process is straining the hot chocolate and egg mixture. I'm putting it through a sieve. You can use a cheesecloth, anything that'll help get any weird chunks that you don't want in your ice cream out of it. I'm going to shake it around a little bit and let it sit for a few minutes. And then when I come back, I'm going to, some of it's strained through, but I'm going to use a spatula to kind of scrape the rest through. And it looks like it's leaving behind possibly little chunks of egg that I may not have tempered well enough. But after I finish straining, we're going to let it sit for a while until it gets to be room temperature. Now that it's room temperature, I'm adding 2 cups of heavy cream, and I'm going to mix it all together. Once it's all mixed together, I'm going to cover it with some plastic wrap and stick it in the fridge overnight. And then tomorrow morning, I will start the process of freezing it to turn it into ice cream. So the ice cream has been sitting in the fridge overnight. We're going to give it a quick stir, and now we're going to turn it into ice cream using a method that doesn't require an ice cream maker. For this, we need a metal pan. I'm using, I think this is an 8x8 or a 9x9. Some of the recipes said a loaf pan or a 13x10 would be good, but this is what I had around. And I'm going to pour the ice cream mixture into it and then put it in the freezer for about 60 minutes. So after 60 minutes, I've pulled it back out of the freezer. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to whisk up the ice cream mixture. You can see it's partially frozen already, but what I want to do is whisk it up to get air in it. So with an ice cream maker, the way that it works is it churns the mixture as it freezes to help get that air in, or to aerate the ice cream. And that process is part of what makes the ice cream so creamy. So when we're doing it without an ice cream maker, we just need to freeze it in short spurts of time and then whisk or stir in between to try to help get that air in to make it nice and creamy. You want to make sure that you're getting the whisk or the spoon in all the corners to mix it all in, because the corners are where it's going to freeze hardest first. And once you think you've done a good job whisking around and stirring it up, we're going to put it back in the freezer for about 40 to 60 minutes and check back and do this process again. So it's been in the freezer 60 minutes and we've pulled it back out. You can see it's frozen quite a bit more than what it did originally. We're just going to try to whisk it up again. Again, making sure to get all the corners and everything together, trying to get that air into it. It's a lot harder, so I think I'm actually going to switch to my silicone whisk, which is a little smaller, and I think it'll hold up a little bit better. So let's do that. Silicone whisk is definitely holding up a little bit better. Once I'm satisfied that I have mixed everything as well as I can, I'm going to stick it back in the freezer for 30 minutes. And now, after 30 minutes, I'm going to repeat the process again, whisking it up and freeze it for a second 30-minute session. So it's been in the freezer twice for 60 minutes and twice for 30 minutes each at a time, whisking in between. And now I've taken it out after that second 30-minute session to whisk it one last time before it goes into the freezer for its final freezing session, which will actually be a few hours, and then I can scoop and eat. So here's the final product, the hot chocolate ice cream after it's been in the freezer for a few hours. It's a little hard, but still scoopable. I'm gonna scoop some out and give it a taste. I think it tastes a lot like a Wendy's Frosty almost, but overall really delicious and highly recommended. Next up, we're gonna make a butter pecan ice cream. This one we'll make in the ice cream maker, but the process of making the base is very similar to the hot chocolate in a lot of ways. To start off, we're whisking 2 whole eggs, and then we're gonna let those sit while we move over to the stove and melt a 1/4 cup of unsalted butter over medium-low heat until it is melted and browned. If you can't see well enough in the video, I do recommend doing a quick Google image search to see what brown butter looks like. It really helped me in figuring out when this was ready, since I've never browned butter before. But it will smell slightly nutty and look very frothy like this. We're now adding 1 cup of packed brown sugar and mixing it together. The recipe says until it's melted. The first time I did this recipe today, which you will see the blooper for later, it didn't really melt the way I thought melting meant. So I think this delicious buttery sugar concoction that you see here is what they mean. I'm now going to turn the heat to low and add 1/2 cup of whole milk and 1 cup of table cream to that and start to mix it together. The reason why we add these different milks to the ice cream, different dairies, is to get the right ratio of fat in the product to give it the best ice cream flavor. I'm going to keep stirring this over low heat while I tell you a little bit about table cream. This was the hardest ingredient for me to find. I got almost everything from Meijer except for this. I couldn't find there. I found it instead at Jewel in this cardboard carton near the half and half and the whipping cream and all that. But there's also a canned version that you might find in the Latin food aisle called Leche Medina that's put out by Nestle. That was more expensive, so I went with the carton instead. After a few minutes, it should start to simmer, which is kind of hard to see here. But then we're going to take it off the heat and bring it over to the eggs to temper it in, just like we did with the hot chocolate mixture. So again, this just means to put a little bit of the hot mixture into the eggs at a time and keep stirring so that you don't cook the eggs separately from the mixture as a whole. So we're going to do that until all of it is mixed together. So we've got the entire mixture back on the stove. We're going to cook it over low heat, stirring constantly until, once again, it's thick enough to coat the back of the wooden spoon. So you can see here that when I draw the line, it's filling in pretty quickly. It's hard to tell with the lighter mixture, but you can see it if you look close. It's thickened up now enough to coat the back of the wooden spoon, as you can see here. So now we're going to take it off the heat and move it over to the counter to strain. So I'm going to pour it into this big bowl through my sieve to strain out anything that I don't want getting into my ice cream. As you can see, this straining left behind some more stuff. I'm not sure exactly what it is, if it's butter, if it's egg, or if I may have broken the base a little bit, so I'm not going to push that through, but hopefully the ice cream will still turn out okay. So the ice cream base has cooled to room temperature, so I'm going to add 1 cup of heavy cream to the mixture, or heavy whipping cream, and then the recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of vanilla and 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract. However, I'm allergic to almonds, so I just added 1 1/4 teaspoons of vanilla extract instead. I usually like a little extra vanilla anyway. Then I'm gonna mix this up, and once it's all combined, I will cover it and put in the fridge overnight. So while your mixture is in the fridge, getting ready to be cold enough to turn into ice cream, you're gonna wanna get the pecans ready. The recipe I found did not call for toasted pecans. However, I think toasted are always better than untoasted, so I went ahead and decided to toast them. To do this, you're going to take 1.5 cups of pecan halves and put them in a dry skillet. That means no oil or anything. Any skillet works fine. The pecans will produce enough of their own oil that you don't need to add any. And then you're just going to put them over low heat on the stove for about 10 minutes-ish for them to toast up. You're going to want to stir regularly, but not constantly. Once they start to smell a little nutty, that's how you know they're done. Then you'll take them off the stove and put them in the freezer to get them ready to be mixed into the ice cream. If you have the opportunity, usually freezing any mix-ins you do for the ice cream is better. It helps keep the temperature stable as you are mixing. However, it's not necessary. I just don't recommend putting them in while they're still warm. So once your pecans are toasted and your ice cream base has chilled, either for a few hours or overnight, you're ready to put it all in the ice cream maker. My ice cream maker is an attachment for my KitchenAid. I figured it made more sense to get an attachment than an additional appliance since I already have and love my KitchenAid stand mixer. A lot of ice cream makers, including this KitchenAid attachment, require that the bowl sits in the freezer for about 24 hours or more before you can make ice cream with it, which is exactly what I've done here. So I just pulled this out of the freezer and I'm hooking it up to my machine. We're going to put the ice cream base into the mixer and get it stirring. I accidentally started the mixer and then started pouring, made it a little more complicated. Pour the mix in first and then start it stirring when you do it. I also generally throw a towel over my mixer. I'm not sure if it really does help, but I feel like it helps cut down on the noise and I figure it can't hurt. So we'll let this go for about 12 minutes and then we'll come back to pour in the pecans. So you'll want to make sure to pay attention to the instructions for your ice cream maker, but most of them will have you stir the mix-ins in about 5 minutes before it's done. In the case for the KitchenAid, it says 12 to 15 minutes in is when you put it in, which should be about 5 to 8 minutes before you finish. So we're pouring in the pecans, and then we will let it go for about another 5 minutes, and then pull it out. So it's been about 4 minutes since I poured the pecans in, but my mixer's doing this click thing. It's kind of hard to describe, but that means that the ice cream is done when it starts to do that. It's the right consistency. So we're going to stop it, and we are going to spoon it out into a freezer-safe container to freeze it for a few more hours. Right now it's soft serve consistency, which you can still totally eat, but I'd like to get it more to a scooping consistency. So I forgot to film the first scoop, and this is a few days later, but you can see that it scoops out beautifully, and it tastes delicious. Unfortunately, it is a little bit grainy, so I do think that I may have broken the base a little bit while cooking, but you still can't go wrong with ice cream. For our last ice cream, we're making a no-cook espresso chocolate chip ice cream, which was my favorite of the 4. We're going to start with 2 cups of heavy cream, 2 to 3 tablespoons of espresso powder. I went with 3 because I love coffee. And then 7 ounces of sweetened condensed milk. The can that I had was 14 ounces, so I just kind of eyeballed what half a can should be. You probably could be more exact with it, but I figured close enough, and it's ice cream, it'll still be delicious. Then you're going to mix it all together. It started out looking like cookies and cream to me, but smelling like amazing espresso. I never did quite get all of the flakes mixed in, but the final product seemed to come out pretty solid colors, so I think they just kind of dissolved as it sat. So once we finish mixing all of this, we're going to take it right over to the ice cream maker. So the bowl has been in the freezer for 24 hours. And I learned my lesson from last time, so I'm pouring in the ice cream base first, And then I'm going to turn the mixer on to stir. And once again, we'll let it go for about 12 to 15 minutes before adding in our mix-in. So it's been about 15 minutes, and now I'm going to add in half a cup of chocolate chips. You can see how it's kind of stopping and the motor at the top is still spinning. That usually means it's done, but since I just put in the chips, I'm still going to let it go a little bit before I pull it out. I only left it going for a minute or two with the chips in, but it's still doing the thing that means that it's thick enough, so I'm stopping it. And I'm going to scoop it out into a freezer-safe bowl, which for this example will just be a Tupperware. I don't have a nice ice cream container like I did last time. And then I'm going to stick it back in the freezer for about 2 more hours before I can scoop and eat it. I could eat it now like before, it's just more of a soft serve consistency, and I want to get it to that hard scoop. Here's the espresso chocolate chip ice cream after it's been in the freezer overnight. It's a little tough to scoop. I don't know if that's because it was in my chest freezer and it might have been a little too cold, but it still comes out okay, and it is absolutely delicious. If you ever had that Starbucks Java chip ice cream back in the, I think 2000s is when it was around in stores, it tasted just like that, and it was one of my favorites then and still is. Thank you for joining us here virtually with the Round Lake Area Library for our program on homemade ice cream. We hope you enjoyed it and go out and make yourself some delicious ice cream right away. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them below and we will respond to you. Otherwise, see you next time.